Blood floated in the air like tiny rubies, spinning in slow arcs as the body bumped against the ceiling of the wreck. Evan Carrick kept his jaw locked tight, forcing himself not to look away as the salvage team dragged the corpse down with magnetic clamps. This was supposed to be a routine recovery mission, but the ship they had found drifting just outside the frontier was nothing short of a graveyard. The air smelled of burned plastic and something else, something sharp that clung to the throat. Evan moved his gloved hand across a scorched bulkhead and the metal flaked away like ash. His crew whispered to each other over the comms, voices hushed as though speaking louder might wake whatever had torn this vessel apart. "Commander," Helen Cade's voice cut in from behind him. Even through the helmet's filter, she had that low, steady tone he always relied on. "You'll want to see this." He turned, boots catching against the deck with a dull click, and followed her beam of light through the fractured corridor. She was crouched beside a console half melted into slag. When she looked up at him, her eyes narrowed behind her visor. "This wasn't an accident," she said. He crouched too, scanning the mess. At first it looked like a systems overload, but then he saw the scoring, deep burns cut with almost surgical precision. Not fire. Not explosion. Weapons. "Anything in the logs?" he asked. Helen shook her head. "Wiped. Not jammed or broken. Wiped clean." She paused, the weight of her next words obvious. But whoever did this didn't expect one thing. She reached into the wreckage and pulled out a data core, dented but intact. For a moment Evan allowed himself a flicker of hope. If they could extract anything from that core, they might finally know what happened to the expeditions that vanished past the frontier. Maybe they would even get answers to the rumors that had haunted spacefaring families for decades. But the thought was short-lived. "Movement," one of the salvage crew whispered over the comms. "Starboard hull. I swear something just." The line cut with a sharp burst of static. Everyone froze. Even with the bulkheads torn and the lights dead, the silence that followed felt heavy, like the wreck itself was holding its breath. Helen stood slowly, tightening her grip on the core. "We should leave. Right now." Evan wanted to agree. Every instinct told him to get his people back to the Resolve and burn hard for safe space. But as he glanced at the drifting bodies tethered against the walls and the frozen expressions on their faces, he felt the same stubbornness that had carried him through the war years before. Leaving now meant bringing nothing but another ghost story back to command. Humanity needed proof. "Seal the core in quarantine," he said, his voice flat but firm. "We're not leaving empty-handed." Helen didn't argue, though he caught the way her jaw clenched. They made their way back through the corridor, magnetic clamps dragging the recovered corpses behind them. The sight was brutal, but procedure was procedure. Families deserved to know, even if all they got was a body bag. Halfway through the wreck, a faint vibration rolled through the deck. Not from their own gear, not from their boots. Something else. The lights on Evan's visor flickered. "Carrick," Helen whispered, "tell me you felt that too." Before he could answer, the corpse tethered behind them twisted suddenly, as if yanked by invisible hands, and vanished into the shadows of the ship. No one moved. No one breathed. Then the comms erupted with panicked voices from the Resolve. "Captain, we're picking up contacts. Multiple. Closing fast." They weren't there a second ago. Evan Carrick stared into the dark where the body had been pulled. The frontier was never meant to be crossed, everyone said. Ships vanished because they broke the rule. Now, standing inside a ship that should have been silent forever, he understood. Something out there was watching, and it had just noticed them. The docking clamps disengaged with a sharp metallic thud as the last of the salvage crew scrambled aboard the Resolve. The ship's interior lights burned a harsh white, throwing stark shadows across the bulkheads as the airlock sealed shut behind them. Everyone was talking at once, overlapping voices laced with fear and adrenaline. Evan Carrick stood in the middle of it all, helmet tucked under his arm, the weight of command pressing down harder than the grav plates ever could. "Quiet," he snapped. His voice cut through the noise like a blade. For a moment, the crew stilled. Helen Cade stepped forward, holding the scorched data core in both hands. Her gloves were smudged with soot, her eyes sharp but tired. "If this thing still has fragments left inside, We might finally know what happened out there. She tilted it slightly, the edges catching the light. But I'm telling you, something didn't want it found. Evan glanced at her, then at the cluster of younger crew members who were whispering again, their eyes darting to the walls as if expecting them to split open. He could feel the panic building, a pressure as real as the vibration of the engines. Before he could speak, the bridge lit up with an alert. A young officer's voice cracked through the comm. "Captain, incoming contacts confirmed. 5, no, 7 vessels. Range closing fast." The room fell silent. Evan's stomach tightened. No one had expected company out here, not in the dead zones beyond the frontier. The void was supposed to be empty. But the way those corpses had been yanked away inside the wreck, the way those signals appeared without warning, it was no coincidence. "Put it on the screen," he ordered. The display flickered, static first, then shapes began to form. Ships, but nothing human. Their silhouettes were jagged, uneven, like predators sculpted from black glass. They didn't fly in formation, not in any way that made sense. Instead, they moved like a pack circling, testing. A low murmur rippled through the crew. Someone whispered a prayer. Another muttered, "We shouldn't be here." Helen set the data core on the console and crossed her arms, her jaw tight. Those things, they were waiting. "Not for us," Evan said, though his voice lacked conviction. "For whatever ship we found out there. Doesn't matter who they were waiting for," Helen shot back. "We're here now." He didn't argue. She was right. The alien vessels shifted, their movements accelerating. Evan felt the bridge tense as the ship's tactical officer, Marcus Hale, slammed his fist on the controls. "They're locking on us." "Orders, Captain." Evan took a breath, steadying himself. "Evasive pattern. Keep shields forward. Don't fire until I say." The resolve lurched as thrusters burned, engines straining under the sudden shift. On the screen, the alien vessels curved in closer, dark shapes against the void. Then, without warning, one broke formation and streaked toward them. The first hit slammed into their shields with a blinding flash. The bridge rattled, lights flickering, but the barrier held. "Shields at 78%, someone shouted. Helen gripped the console, eyes locked on Evan. "You can't play defense with these things. We either fight back or get ripped apart." He hated that she was right again. Defense wouldn't save them. Not against something that had stripped a ship to the bone and erased its logs. "Target the lead vessel," Evan said. "Load rails and fire on my mark." The crew jumped to action, fingers flying across controls. Tension hung heavy, every second stretched thin. The alien ship swung wide, almost taunting them, its jagged frame gleaming faintly. For a moment it seemed to shimmer, as though its hull was bending the light itself. Evan clenched his fist. "Fire!" The resolve roared. Rail slugs ripped through the void, streaking toward the enemy vessel. The impact lit the screen with a sudden bloom of sparks. The alien ship twisted violently, fracturing in a spray of debris. For one heartbeat, the bridge erupted in cheers. Humanity had struck back, and it worked. But the celebration died as quickly as it began. The remaining 6 ships shifted as one, and their movements became sharp, predatory. "They're not running," Helen said softly. "They're adapting." The second volley came harder. The ship shook, alarms screamed, and sparks rained from a ruptured panel. 2 crew members went down, one clutching his side, the other motionless. "Shields failing," Marcus shouted. 60% and dropping fast. Evan's knuckles whitened around the railing. His crew was bleeding, his ship was burning, and the enemy wasn't finished. "Course away from the wreck," he ordered. "We lead them off. Get us distance." "Captain," the comms officer interrupted, her voice trembling. "The wreck, it's transmitting." Every head turned. "What do you mean?" Helen demanded. "I mean it just lit up," the officer said, her eyes wide. "It's sending out a signal, not to us, to them." Evan felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. The ship they just crawled through, the one filled with corpses and silence, wasn't a derelict. It was a beacon. And by taking the core, they had triggered it. The Resolve tore through the dark with engines burning hotter than safety regs allowed. Every corridor trembled under the strain. Hull plating groaned like a living thing, and the bridge reeked of scorched insulation. The alien vessels still followed. Not close enough to finish them, not far enough to shake. They were herding the Resolve, testing its limits like wolves running down a wounded animal. Evan Carrick braced himself against the command chair, sweat trickling down his temple. Report. Shields holding at 35%, Marcus Hale muttered through clenched teeth. His hands hovered over the weapons console like a man waiting for permission to punch. We can't take another volley like that. Helen Cade leaned across her station, voice tight but steady. Engines are overheating. We'll burn out the cores if we keep this pace. Evans scanned their faces. Tired. Frightened. But still here. Still his crew. Options, he demanded. None good, Helen shot back. Unless you count dying slower. Captain. The comms officer, pale and visibly shaking, interrupted. We're picking up something from the wreck again. Not the beacon this time. It's different. Static filled the bridge, then broke into fragments of a voice. Not human. Not machine. A guttural, desperate tone carried through the speakers. Evan's chest tightened. Open channel. The sound grew clearer, words mangled but recognizable. Help, help. I remain alive. The crew exchanged wide-eyed glances. Helen cursed under her breath. There's someone still on that wreck? Impossible, Marcus snapped. We searched it. We pulled bodies. Evan stared at the dark screen where alien ships prowled. Something about the timing gnawed at him. Why reveal a survivor now, in the middle of a chase? A trap? Bring it in, he ordered. Helen's head snapped toward him. Are you serious? We're bleeding out with 6 ships on our tail, and you want to haul aboard whatever was hiding in that charnel house. Whatever it is, it's alive, Evan said, his voice low but unshaking. If it knows why they wiped that ship, it's worth the risk. The silence that followed was heavy. No one agreed, but no one disobeyed. The order stood. Minutes later, a life pod was retrieved from the wreck, its hull scorched, atmosphere barely stable. Inside, a figure slumped against the restraints, its skin a mottled gray with faint bioluminescent lines running along the veins. Too human-shaped to ignore, too alien to mistake. They brought it to quarantine. The creature coughed violently, spilling thick dark fluid into the respirator. Its eyes snapped open, black orbs that shimmered with faint silver threads. It focused on Evan first. You, not of them, it rasped. Not of the swarm. Helen stood at the viewport, arms crossed, expression locked between fury and disbelief. Captain, this is insane. We don't know what that thing carries. Diseases, sabotage implants, a beacon of its own. Evan ignored her for the moment. He leaned closer to the comm panel. You called for help. What happened to your ship? The alien's throat worked, its breathing ragged. We resisted. We fled. They follow all who flee. Always. Until silence. Its head rolled slightly, eyes dimming. But you strike different. Not prey. Not yet. The words left the room colder than before. Marcus spat. It's stalling. Look at it. Half dead. Why would they keep one alive unless it's meant to screw with us? Helen cut in sharply. Maybe because it wants us to hear this. Maybe because we're not supposed to know why they've left us alone all these years. Evan's jaw tightened. He had heard the same rumors everyone else had. That humanity's border wasn't just fear, it was protection. Some whispered the enemy had tested Earth once and turned away. Others said Earth was simply overlooked. No one knew. Until now. The alien lifted a trembling hand against the glass, silver veins pulsing weakly. You should have stayed behind your line, it whispered. Now they will come. They will consume. As they consumed us. On the bridge, The alert klaxon blared. The swarm ships were closing, no longer circling, no longer waiting. Marcus' voice roared through the comms. "Captain, they're charging weapons. Full volley incoming." Evan stared at the alien, at its half-dead body pressed against the glass, and felt the weight of the moment. If it was telling the truth, Earth was no longer hidden. And if that was true, this chase was only the beginning. The Resolve limped through the void, hull plating scorched, shields reduced to little more than a glow. The alien ships had pulled back for now, not out of mercy, but strategy. Predators didn't rush the kill when the prey was already bleeding out. On the bridge, the atmosphere was suffocating. The crew spoke in short bursts, voices sharp, each one carrying the edge of exhaustion. Evan Carrick stood over the tactical display, arms braced against the console. "They'll find Earth," Marcus Hale muttered, pacing like a caged animal. "They know our signature now. They'll track it back. And we're sitting here waiting to die." Helen Cade didn't look up from her station. Her hands were blackened with grease, her uniform streaked from crawling through half the ship's guts. "You have a better idea? Because unless you can conjure a fleet out of thin air, complaining won't patch the engines." Marcus turned on her. "You think fixing pipes matters when an entire species is about to get chewed to bones?" "Bones don't matter if the engines don't turn," Helen shot back. "Or do you plan on throwing rocks at them?" "Enough." Evan's voice cut through like steel. Both of them froze. He looked between them, jaw tight, then tapped the tactical map. The swarm ships moved in wide arcs, almost lazy, circling the Resolve like they had all the time in the universe. "They're not striking us because they don't need to. They're herding, keeping us in line." Helen frowned. "Line toward what?" Koresh's voice rasped from the quarantine chamber. "Weak but certain. Toward their node. Their nest. You are being led to silence." The alien had regained some strength since they pulled it aboard. Its bioluminescent veins pulsed faintly as it leaned forward against the glass. "They do not waste ships on small prey. They guide you to their heart, where all is consumed." "Then that's where we go," Evan said quietly. The room went still. Helen stared at him as if he'd just ordered them to crack open the airlock. "You can't be serious." "Think about it," he pressed on. "If they're pulling us toward their command, then that's where they control this hunt from. Take it out, we cripple their ability to find Earth." Marcus' eyes lit with a dangerous fire. "You're talking about a direct strike." "I'm talking about survival," Evan said. "We can't outrun them. We can't hide. But if we cut the head off their pack, then maybe the rest scatter," Marcus finished. For once, he looked almost hopeful. Helen slammed a hand against the console. "Or maybe we all die faster. This ship is barely holding together. We're down crew. We're down power. And you want to ram a command fortress." Evan met her eyes. She wasn't wrong. But the alternative was waiting for the swarm to trace their trail back to Earth. That was a death sentence too, only slower. Koresh lifted its hand against the glass. "Their node is vast, built into hollow stone, veined with machines. My people tried. We failed." Evan's gaze hardened. "Then you can help us do better." The alien's black eyes lingered on him for a long moment, unreadable. Finally, Koresh lowered its hand. "You strike like fire. Reckless. Perhaps they will not expect it." The decision was made. Hours later, the Resolve coasted on minimal power, slipping through the black toward a looming shape. At first it looked like an asteroid, jagged and scarred. Then the lights began to show, lines of alien architecture pulsing like veins across the stone. Ships drifted in and out of cavernous ports, the swarm's command heart alive with activity. Inside the ship, every crew member strapped into armor or gear. No speeches. No rallying cries. Just the quiet ritual of people who knew they might not come back. Helen adjusted the straps of her toolkit, muttering under her breath. Evan caught it. "What was that?" he asked. She glanced at him. Just wondering if anyone will even remember us when this goes wrong." He forced a faint smile. "If it goes wrong, remembering won't matter much." That earned him the ghost of a smirk. "Terrible pep talk, Captain." "Wasn't trying to pep you," he said. "Just trying to keep you honest." The strike began with silence. The Resolve slid into one of the asteroid's shadowed fissures, engines barely humming. Drones patrolled in predictable loops, their movements precise. Koresh fed routes into their system, corridors his own people had once tried to use. When the first drone crossed their path, Marcus fired. A single rail shot tore it apart in a burst of sparks, debris scattering against the rock. No alarm. No signal. The crew exhaled as one. They pressed deeper. The corridors inside the command node were labyrinthine, lined with machinery that pulsed like organs. The air stank of chemical rot. Every corner could have been the last, yet they moved with brutal efficiency, planting charges, sabotaging conduits. Then the swarm noticed. It began with a ripple, the hum of the walls changing pitch. Then came the shriek of alarms, sharp and alien, rattling through bone. Figures poured from the shadows, jagged forms of living metal and flesh, claws scraping against the stone. The firefight was savage. The crew fought with desperation, rifles cracking, grenades ripping holes through walls. Helen hurled an improvised charge down a corridor, the blast tearing half a squad apart. Marcus laughed grimly as he cut through another wave, his voice hoarse. "Now this is how humans say hello." Evan pushed them forward, deeper toward the command core. They lost 2 people on the way, cut down in brutal flashes. Their screams echoed in helmets long after the silence returned. At last they reached the chamber. Vast, cavernous, its center dominated by a pulsating structure that looked part engine, part brain. Light coursed through it in great veins, spreading into every wall, every machine. "This is it," Helen breathed. Evan raised his rifle, then glanced at her. "You know what to do." She stepped forward, planting the charges with steady hands despite the tremor in her voice. "You realize once this blows, there's no way they won't notice us." "They've already noticed," Evan said. Koresh's eyes gleamed faintly as it stared at the core. "They will come. All of them. To protect this." "Then we'd better move fast," Evan muttered. They set the final charge. The timer began its silent countdown. And then the walls shifted. From the shadows, a towering figure emerged. Not like the others. Taller, its armor seamless, its eyes burning with cold fire. The swarm commander. The room filled with its voice, low and resonant. "You should not have crossed." Evan lifted his weapon, his crew bracing behind him. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the commander's blade snapped into being, crackling with energy. And the chamber erupted into chaos. The swarm commander moved with terrifying precision, its blade cutting the air in a streak of burning light. Evan barely ducked in time, the energy scorching past his helmet. He fired back, shots ricocheting off its armor as if he were throwing pebbles at a fortress. "Cover fire!" Evan shouted, rolling behind a fragment of shattered machinery. Marcus answered with a roar, unleashing a storm of gunfire. The rounds sparked and flared across the commander's body, slowing it but never piercing. The alien advanced through the barrage without hesitation, each step vibrating the floor. Helen sprinted toward the core, shielding the detonator with her body. "If we set this off now, we'll all die in the blast," she cried, her voice sharp over the comms. "We were dead the second we came here," Marcus bellowed, firing until his rifle clicked dry. The commander lunged. Its blade pierced through Marcus' shoulder, the force throwing him against the wall. His scream ripped through the comms. He slumped, blood smearing the stone. Evan charged, slamming into the commander with everything he had. The impact knocked the alien half a step off balance, just enough for Helen to yank Marcus clear. Sparks rained from the walls as Koresh stepped forward, its frail body trembling but defiant. "You are not gods," Koresh rasped at the commander in its own guttural tongue. "You are parasites." The commander's burning eyes shifted toward him. For a moment, it actually paused. That was the only opening Evan needed. He drove his knife, standard issue, nothing special, into a seam of the alien's armor. The blade sank shallow, but the creature staggered, shrieking like metal tearing itself apart. "Now, Helen," Evan barked. She didn't hesitate. Her fingers slammed the detonator. The charges around the core erupted, one after another, a cascade of white fire that lit the chamber like a newborn sun. The commander howled as the shockwave tore through the node. The brain engine cracked open, spilling energy in wild arcs that shredded machinery and flesh alike. The entire asteroid trembled, alarms screaming in languages no human could understand. "Move!" Evan shouted. They dragged Marcus between them, stumbling through collapsing corridors as the swarm closed in. Drones swarmed from every shadow, shrieking, claws raking the walls. Koresh hurled itself into their path, its body flaring with bioluminescent fire. "I will hold them," it hissed. Evan turned back. "Koresh, no. Go." The alien's voice was final, its dark eyes fixed on him. Then it unleashed a blinding surge of energy from within its chest. The blast shredded the corridor behind them, consuming both Koresh and the drones in a storm of white flame. There was no time to grieve. They stumbled into the hangar bay, the Resolve waiting, its hull battered but alive. Helen hauled Marcus up the ramp while Evan covered their retreat, firing until his rifle overheated. "Punch it!" he shouted the second they were aboard. The Resolve roared to life, engines screaming as it blasted out of the collapsing node. Behind them, the asteroid shuddered, split by explosions that gutted its core. Alien ships scattered in panic, their formation breaking as the command link dissolved. For the first time, the swarm looked uncertain. On the bridge, Helen strapped Marcus into a seat, her hands shaking. Blood seeped through his suit, but his eyes were open, stubborn and burning. "Told you," he muttered weakly. "Humans, don't run." Evan sank into the captain's chair, sweat stinging his eyes, his body trembling with exhaustion. On the display, the swarm ships drifted aimlessly, their movements no longer unified. The death of the node had broken their spine. Silence stretched across the bridge, broken only by the hum of failing systems. Finally, Helen spoke, her voice hoarse. "So, we actually did it." Evan looked at her. At Marcus. At the empty seat where Koresh should have been. His throat tightened. "We did something," he said. "Whether it's enough," he trailed off, because there was no way to know. Through the viewport, the stars stretched endless and cold. Behind them, the remains of the node burned like a dying star, fragments scattering into the void. The crew sat in the fragile quiet, knowing Earth might have a chance now, but also knowing this war was far from over. And somewhere, out in the endless dark, other nodes were waiting.